Thanks for choosing this breakout session. There are a lot of good ones to choose from. My name is Meredith Hills. I'm a Senior Policy Manager at Jobs for the Future. So me and my colleague Mike are going to kick things off, and he'll introduce himself in a moment as well. And then we will turn it over to the folks from Illinois who will share a little bit about their work too. So just to introduce you to JFF, or Jobs for the Future, if you're not familiar, JFF is a national organization that works across the whole country on improving workforce and education systems. And we have a policy and advocacy unit, as well as a variety of specific learning centers and research centers that do technical assistance, research, programmatic work on a variety of really specific topics that all fit under that intersection of education and workforce development, with really the underlying goal of economic self-sufficiency for every individual, to simplify it. So I'm going to start off by kind of taking a step back and talking a little bit about our Big Blur vision. Essentially, the Big Blur argues for a fully transformed and radical restructuring of education for grades 11 through 14. And this will happen by erasing some of those arbitrary dividing lines between high school, college, and the workforce. Essentially, this would open new opportunities for all the learners and workers in our current systems, but especially those that our systems really leave behind. Systems that promote an entirely new type of institution, neither high school nor college, designed specifically to better meet the needs of young people 10th grade and on, although it also brings into account career exploration and involvement before 10th grade, and help those students prepare to succeed in the world of work. So you might be saying, this all sounds kind of familiar, but I kind of don't have any idea what you're talking about, because the Big Blur vision doesn't exist yet. So one of the things that we're doing is getting input from state leaders, local leaders, federal policymakers to say, here's the end goal of what we want, this fully transformed new system. What does that look like and how do we get there? So there are some pieces of the Big Blur that have existed for a while, and from everyone in the room, I think you all touch pretty much all of these examples. So you might be thinking this sounds kind of like CTE or dual enrollment, career pathways, and all of those pieces are steps and part of the Big Blur, but they all still operate independently at a programmatic level. So what that shift will look like is a systemic overhaul. Some pieces that will exist in any blurred model would be, first and foremost, free for students. Not just free for students, but students aren't losing any money, and students are paid for any work that they are doing. A guided pathways model is a piece of this. Fully integrated work-based learning, academic and career navigation, and wraparound supports, which covers everything that you could think of for wraparound support, should be included in this. Breaking it down further, there are 4 components of the Big Blur. And we are working on a resource now that's going to be coming out shortly. It's a state policy framework of state policy conditions that support the Big Blur. And I'm happy to share this after we publish it later this month. It essentially breaks down each of these components almost in a checklist sort of way across a spectrum from not at all blurred to fully blurred, which we wouldn't expect that any state is doing at this point, and how you can match yourself in each category to each piece of the framework. So it makes the Big Blur a little bit more actionable and specific. But like I said, it goes into these 4 categories. So 1, incentives for accountability and financing to promote new ways for organizing learning. And when we go into implementation, we really break apart incentives for accountability and incentives for financing, because there's so much that goes into both of those systems. Second is alignment of systems so that 11th grade students enter basically a new institutional structure that's focused on post-secondary and career preparation. Third is governance, where a state cabinet level team or empowered secretary or commissioner has decision-making authority over unified grades. And one distinction for governance is an advisory council that doesn't really have any teeth or authority might be an early step, but that isn't fully blurred. Having that empowered structure is what makes that distinction. And then finally, staffing structures designed effectively to organize learning and work experiences and support systems for grades 11 to 14. So that includes that every school shouldn't just have, an at-large counselor, but really a college and career counselor who's equipped and been provided the professional development to support students in really specific ways. This also looks into teacher certifications and shared teachers between the secondary and post-secondary levels. So for college and high school programs and other things that fall under that umbrella, where because of accreditation requirements, often you can't share instructors. What could that possibly look like in a high quality and productive way? So now that I've talked a little bit about our guiding vision, I'm going to pass on to my colleague Mike, who will talk about some of the work we're doing in different places.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Okay, I'm going to get over here.
Yeah.
Back on Track Pathways is sort of started well before the big blur, and it's work that we have been doing over the last 15 years around the country as we've been working with school systems, communities at large, what we would call the collective impact groups in communities, as well as community-based organizations, charter systems, etc. And just looking at best practices, essentially, and came up with this framework, Back on Track Pathways, which is really just what it is, a framework that has all of the elements that I think you probably have been talking about over the last 6 or 7 hours today, into a framework with core features, core elements, some guiding questions, some model scenarios and approaches, and resources, and then took that out to the field. So that's sort of the backdrop for this. Sort of this is recognizing that there is no one direct route to post-secondary and through post-secondary. It also is giving license to the fact that post-secondary is beyond 2-year or 4-year institutions and may include training pathways and on-ramps to training pathways, and then articulations between those on-ramps, those training pathways into high-quality employment. So, but the Back on Track post-secondary success model has been sort of tested out in a number of locales around the country. And we started with a 9-city Social Innovation Fund demonstration opportunity works. JFF was the implementer of that initiative, 9 regions around the country. And that was a randomized controlled study that was done by Urban Institute, looking at those communities who implemented Back on Track against a comparison group. What did it mean for college readiness, college access, college going, and then persistence in college. We, based on promising results from that 9-city demonstration, SIF demonstration, which showed impacts on college going rates for the population being what we frequently have called opportunity youth, young people who are disconnected or disconnecting or who are coming back in and re-engaging. We were asked by the Annie Casey Foundation to bring that Back on Track model to their Learn and Earn to Achieve Potential Social Innovation Fund, which they started 7 years ago in 10 communities. Back on Track was the post-secondary success model for young people who had completed high school and were planning to go on to post-secondary. We also partnered with Jobs for America graduates. They were the other national partner who brought the sort of the direct pathway to employment to that initiative. I think what's interesting about the testing of Back on Track in those locales is that that was a mixture of nonprofit organizations that were recovering young people who had left school, some picking up last year of high school, and Casey Foundation, to their credit, ran the 3-year Social Innovation Fund. MDRC, a national evaluation firm, did the evaluation of our model in that context. And then that ended, and what we found in these LEAP communities was that they were making some good traction, but when you are targeting this work to particular demographics like youth who are aging out of foster care, youth who are in the juvenile justice system, youth who are homeless by definition, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to take place. There are a lot of partnerships that need to be built. There's a lot of support. And to the foundation's credit, we're in their city here, they added on another 3 years. And so we have those LEAP sites that have been now implementing the model for 6 years, and now they re-up for another 2 years. So at the end, there will be 8 years of working with these communities and states as they've begun to scale the work statewide. I only say that because it's not, we brought the model, we brought best practices, we brought essential questions, we brought the work that you're doing and put it under the framework of Back on Track, and brought some support to help catalyze things. But it takes time. The sites brought themselves, their talent, and young people. One of the features of the LEAP initiative was putting young people right at the center. So we built an ambassador community. There were LEAP ambassadors from all of the sites. These are young people who went through leadership training, who weren't just token youth leaders who were invited to get on a panel and sort of say something, but they were trained to really make sure that their voice came through in this work that they're doing, that they're identifying really what are the critical issues that matter to them. What are the policies, even at the state and local level, that interfere? Where can we sort of insert ourselves into legislation, into policy work? So this became larger than the model. The model itself is pretty elemental in that an iterative and spirals around enriched preparation, which takes place for those who haven't completed high school yet, which is integrating high-quality college and career-ready instruction with rigorous academic and social supports. So wraparound supports, guidance, dealing with trauma, paying attention to those issues that are barriers. That's that phase. Spirals into post-secondary bridging. That's that transition period. That can happen while you're still in high school, and it can also happen in the period between high school and post-secondary. And it can happen as you're starting post-secondary experiences as well. That's the bridging period. And that's where the sort of strong, powerful partnerships take place. That's where there is really clear, informed transition counseling college navigator positions. I think one of the things that was lifted up in all of this work is the importance of somebody who was trained as a college and career transition navigator, specialist. They call them different things in different locales, but it's different from a guidance counselor position. It's somebody who can speak the language of post-secondary, who can speak the language of training programs, who can engage with employers, who's trained in that regard, and who hangs out in those places too, and is an invited partner. May have dedicated space. There are certain indicators that there's good partnership between secondary and post-secondary when those institutions and are comfortable there. When we started this model years ago, we called it first-year retention support. We were interested in that period after the transition to post-secondary. It's one thing to apply, it's one thing to fill out the FAFSA, it's one thing to go through all of that. It's another thing to show up on day one, and then it's another thing to show up on day two. And then, by the way, check back 4 weeks later. Am I still going? We all know these things, right? But college is different, post-secondary is different. How do you prepare, introduce, practice, all those things before it happens? How do you credit those experiences so that there are no surprises? So that we built into the model frequent check-ins, weekly in the first month, then monthly, interested in, are you still getting your money, your financial aid? Are you getting the credits? Are you getting the C's that you need to maintain your credit? Because you can look up and realize your financial aid didn't carry forth with you to that next semester. You thought it did, but no one is. This is different from high school where the clocks are regulated. It's 55 minutes, 45 minutes, etc. No one tells you when to study, right? No, things like that. All of that was built into the model. Just going through real quickly, enriched preparation is college and career-ready culture, college and career-ready instruction, intentional use of time, technology, and assessments to customize instruction, accelerate learning, and always you'll see personalized guidance and support. The first bullet, just by the way, college culture, when we would walk into high schools and secondary settings, the whole thing is, how do you get the whole school climate to see that post-secondary is a reasonable and appropriate goal, right? Who are we to say who goes where? We don't get to make that choice, so how do you get the whole school? What does it mean to shift culture? The bridging phase, this is where we lift it up and put in, supported dual enrollment, your first technical courses, those early credentials, focus on college knowledge and success strategies and employment readiness. I won't go into the details other than to say on this one, the success strategies can include the fact that making an appointment with a faculty member outside of class is a predictor of college success. So teaching that, knowing that, practicing that, what does it feel like? Those are simple, that's low-hanging fruit, right? And going back to data and measuring what matters. So how do you practice it, and then how do you ensure and incentivize that it's happening? Because our bet is that when it does happen, that there will be, the students will persist. We all know that. I mean, you just call a faculty member and say, look, I have a question. When are your office hours? Just feeling that equipped to do that, knowing how to do it, maybe having your hand held first time, maybe setting up with college faculty, this is going to happen, can you please, be a little more indulgent, the first time till the training wheels come off. So that's that. First year support, then, which is the next one. Support for students that are earning credits predictive of completion. When you do that course map, right, college, are those credits that are predictive, are they happening? Are they getting them? Just-in-time supports to ensure persistence, those nudging technologies, that nudge, that sort of encourage the young person to sort of check in, and then building attachment, feeling comfortable in the environment. Knowing ahead of time, belonging someplace in the institution, where do you see yourself too? Do you see yourself there? That's important. Just over time, just trying to lift up some of the things that we saw that as our sites implemented this with strong results, we saw the need to be able to combine both individualized programming with cohort-based programming. And in some cases, traveling as a cohort, knowing that if you were in high school together, just seeing your peers in college or in that next step opportunity was important. So how can you maintain cohort? How can you maintain a sense of community? Near-peer supports, really important. How can you use alums and college higher-level students who can be peer supporters? Getting those habits of mind in college academic readiness, time management, etc. Finding yourself in the institution, agency and autonomy, how we would watch and support our sites in shifting autonomy from the adult to the young person. Recognizing that there are no wrong doors. This is messy, there are no wrong doors that you enter. You learn from those experiences. This is not linear. Our student-centered navigation tools, we lifted that up earlier today. We had a platform that we called My Best Bets, which puts a young person right at the center, getting them to do the labor market investigation in their community. Yep. And creative use of incentives, on and off ramps, dedicated transition staff, and measuring what matters. Those are some of the things that I just wanted to share. And I guess really the question that we can carry forth later even is what structures, strategies, practices, and relationships help build momentum. Because we see this as where do you gain momentum in the things that you do, in preparation, entry, progress, and completion, and where do you lose momentum as a school, as a system, in your partnerships, and how can you really reinforce those momentum gainers, and how can you minimize where you might lose momentum. So this is really above the line and below the line. Could open it up for just questions before we transition. I don't know what resonated, what you wonder about. Maybe this is all, yeah, that's right. Oh, good. So how do you do it?
Okay, let's ask him a really simple question. So what makes it like back on track? Are there things about it
Sure.
like
Well, so that's not a silly question at all. So that back on track model was really focused on those young people who we would say are not, had either left the system before getting their high school diploma or coming back in, or were struggling and were behind in grades. So it was really targeting a population that had gotten off the traditional course and really were in pursuit of that same goal of getting into post-secondary and into career success. And so this was a model that would help them get back on their track. Good question.
in your board model, I was thinking particularly about the post-secondary career transition and blurring of that line. Have you found any communities that are doing that really successfully?
Yeah, that's a good question. Overall, I think some of the state level like progress that we've seen around that. We've found in Colorado, Delaware, Texas is doing some great work. And I can give you some other examples when we come back together at the end. So a lot of those have been kind of like one-off opportunities because you happen to have like a really well-staffed Department of Education team that works really well with the district community college. Or this is a passion project of the governor and he's coming into his last term and so he really wants to pass state policy that supports it. Those are specific instances in the places I just listed. So they're really specifically like sometimes statewide policy and systems, sometimes local examples of those that blurring occurs.